Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to talk to you now, if I may, about trouser creases. Now, if you look at trousers nowadays, well, I mean, smart trousers, that is, not jeans. If you look at smart trousers nowadays, they invariably almost have creases down the front of them. Now, this is a hangover from the Victorian period. Because you see, back then, ironing was not something you did quickly or as a chore, right? Ironing was a serious business. It was something that you had servants to do, because to do it yourself was laborious, right? You had to actually heat the iron and things. It didn't just heat itself because of an electric plug. And so trouser creases were a status symbol. To have that crease put down the front of your trousers showed you could afford servants, and you could afford the kind of machinery that they needed to do that. Before irons, you get something called a linen press, which is like a big cabinet, and it basically just squishes things flat. And this is how they kept their shirts pressed back then, if they couldn't afford to have them ironed. Which, why would you have your shirt ironed? No one's going to see that. That's not a status symbol, because your shirt is almost entirely concealed. Back then, shirts were you wouldn't have worn a shirt like I'm wearing it now, because back then a shirt was an undergarment. It was something that you wore concealed, and this kind of gradually, the taboo about this gradually became less so, because if you look at people in for example, the 16th century, they have the big sort of collars and then nothing else. You can't see the rest of the shirt except maybe the cuffs as well, the frilly collar and cuffs. And then you go towards the 18th century, you get perhaps a little bit more shirt collar showing, a little bit more shirt cuff, but still generally very high cut waistcoats, big jackets. You can't see the shirt. And there is a reason for this, because back then underpants were not their own garment. Generally, you could have drawers, but generally what you had was a very, very long shirt with a tail, and you would tuck that between your legs. You wouldn't have underpants. And so the shirt was an undergarment. It was what you wore beneath your clothes, and so it wouldn't be seen. As you get through to the Victorian period, you see slightly more of the shirt being shown, because the waistcoat get cut a little bit lower. Still, by our standards, Victorian waistcoats were incredibly high, but you start to see a little bit more. What you would see is starched cuffs and collars, which would have been detachable, so that the cuffs would have been able to come off and the collar would have come off. It wouldn't have been attached like all our collars are nowadays, sewn on. You would attach it with a pin at the front and the back. And so that became acceptable. You could show that shirt collar, much as shirt collars have been shown back in way back when. It's only very recently that that shirts became an acceptable kind of outer garment. And so you wouldn't waste your time and your money ironing your shirts, because no one saw your shirt. You would just press it, and that would be good enough to stop it from going all horrible and wrinkly like my shirt is, but I don't care. Your trousers, however, they were much more visible. You would iron, and you would have a crease in those if you wanted that to show the status. However, before, it was very non-essential. You didn't need to have creases in your trousers like so many suit trousers have nowadays, so many smart trousers. And so if you look at pictures of powerful people back in the day, you'll see a fairly even split of people with trouser creases ironed in and without trouser creases ironed in. So, for example, here's Joseph Chamberlain, a very important politician of the day. You can see he didn't always have creases ironed into his trousers. Sometimes he did, sometimes he didn't. Winston Churchill, another example, sometimes did, sometimes didn't. And then there's also a point, this is quite funny actually, I was at Treasurer's House in York, right, which is an absolutely incredible place. If you've not been, then I recommend it wholeheartedly. And that was the project of a man called Frank Green, who was a kind of philanthropist, industrialist, and eccentric, absolutely. If you look at the house, you will see what kind of an eccentric he was. And I have a picture here of him modelling a style that was quite fashionable in the 20s. If you notice his trousers, they've got creases down the side. They're ironed the opposite way. So it shows that the trouser creases that are so ubiquitous today were originally a matter of some individual taste. And it's only very modern, the idea that you must have it in the front and down the back. Now, I suppose the culminating point of this is that I don't actually like the idea of formal rules. While I think it would be nice if everyone dressed up a bit more than they do nowadays, I don't like the idea of there being formal rules as to what you wear, except in possibly like white tie, the most elevated. But even then, there's a lot of wiggle room. And eventually I might do a video, show you my white tie and explain the history behind it and my personal choices. But I'm a firm believer in clothing choice. I just wish that it was kind of elevated a little bit more. I know that that's kind of a contradiction in terms. But yes, if you like the idea of having creases down the side of your trousers, go for it. I absolutely implore you. Go for it. Why the hell not? Personally, I don't really like having creases down the front of my trousers. So when I buy trousers, they normally have creases down them. But then if they come out in the wash, I don't put them back in. I just have my trousers as they are. And so I suppose that's kind of the overarching message here, is that trouser creases need not be your jailer. Crease your trousers if you like and how you like.